Hi friends, I hope you have a wonderful day, and this time I'm gonna be reacting to how it fell apart for Oscar Piastri. Why it sounds so wrong when I'm saying Oscar? Oscar. Oscar? Jesus. So yeah, I'm kinda his fan, so yeah, I just wanna know. So yeah, let's just start this one.
By the halfway point of the 2025 season, things were looking pretty sweet for Oscar Piastri. Following his win in the Dutch Grand Prix as his teammates sat in a cloud of shattered British hope, he was in the lead of the World Championship, and by a decent margin too. He was securing pole positions consistently, and from there would lead races in commanding fashion all the way until the end, taking the win in an understated and ultimately boring way that made all of us go, wait, what? Oh yeah, right, he was leading, wasn't he? His demeanor under pressure had people labeling him the Iceman, comparing him to the incomparable Kimi Räikkönen and Scott Dixon. Might have been just me on that one, and it just seemed that nothing at all could rattle this guy. And all of this was happening at a time where his teammate fell to pieces whenever the sight of an apex loomed large, or whenever the track was green, or whenever the wind picked up. This was a career-defining state of driving from the man from Victoria, and set him on a course to become the newest Formula One World Drivers' Champion. So what the hell went wrong?
Yeah, I'm really interested about this.
You know, it's a little ironic, don't you think? His countryman and manager has seen all of this before. In a top team with the championship firmly in his grasp with a few rounds remaining, only for it all to crumple and fall apart at the hands of himself. There were a lot of lessons that he had taken out of those final years of his in Formula One.
He's working at McLaren?
How to fight for championships, how to assert oneself into a team, and how to keep a mental fortitude when up against a formidable foe. In fact, he outlined all of this in his memoir, Coping with Being a Dungeon Bitch. Now he was out of the game and in a managing role for Oscar, guiding him through the landmines and assuring that whatever pitfalls came during his tenure at Red Bull would not come about for Piastri. He wasn't about to have another multi-21 moment. No. Not under his watch, and especially not for his driver. And for a while, it all seemed to be going to plan.
Until
Zandvoort, he had procured the most podiums of any driver that year, was leading the World Championship, and seemed completely calm regarding the whole situation to an uncanny degree. He even had a burger named after him that was dished out for free for every podium that he would score. Many cows.
Seriously, that's so cool.
Suffered at the hands of that McLaren rocket ship. However, rocket ship or not, there has been so much more to Oscar's season than just a faster car. All throughout the previous season, he did exhibit the strengths that I just dribbled on about, but his consistency was that of mashed potatoes. Or large straw. For every great weekend that he would have 4 to 5 mid ones where teammate Lando Norris would just leave him in the dust. By and large, Oscar got his ass handed to him that season, whenever he wasn't handing over sprint race wins. So during the off-season, Oscar would revise his 2024 campaign. What worked and what didn't work, and distinguish the consistencies in his good weekends and attempt to implement them across the board heading into the season 2025. He also worked on his fitness and training regime to better prepare himself for what lay ahead, learned from the struggles of coping with the constant flyaways in the latter half of the season, and formulated a template of which he would use to attack the season where McLaren were going to be going in as red-hot favourites. The upshot was that the one glaring weakness that he had in 2024, which was consistency, would be vanquished for 2025. His performances over the first half of the season were held to high acclaim, none more so than the 4th round in Bahrain where he took a clean sweep, was the dominant pace setter, and again doing so while his teammate was meddling down the order, doing his utmost to ensure that he would get as little points as he possibly could. Whenever Oscar got ahead, he gave off the aura of being the safest pair of hands in motorsport that you could find. And while Lando did achieve a smattering of wins, Oscar never found himself to be too far away. From the second race in Shanghai all the way to the 16th frickin' round of the season, he had only found himself off the podium once. Furthermore, he kept himself ahead in the win tally as well as the point standings. So it was a remarkable bout of form that he was on. Though, ironically, to find where the rot of the season truly began, you have to begin in that 16th round. We're all familiar with what transpired this year in Monza with McLaren. Lando had the pace edge over Oscar, did so the whole weekend, was ahead of him for the whole race, only for the team to piss in his cornflakes during the pit stop. Oscar emerged ahead of Lando when all was said and done, only for McLaren to get on the horn to tell him to bend over and cede position to Lando.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, bling, 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 blah.
Debate raged as to whether this was right or wrong, strong or weak, whatever have you. Ultimately, this proved to be damaging to McLaren's overall image to a portion of the fanbase, and consequently toward Oscar Piastri's title campaign. How damaging, might you ask? Well, remember that burger deal that he had going on? Free burger for every podium that he scored? Well, after what transpired next, they changed it from that to whenever Oscar races. Ain't that just a great sign of confidence from your
Ooh, yeah, confidence. Really low. Oh my god.
sponsors? I want for Piastri to resume his winning ways? Well, I wouldn't hold your breath, because after that Monza malarkey, that's when things started to take a really wrong turn. What transpired that weekend was playing on his mind all throughout the lead up to the next race. And it wasn't even just that pit stop hullabaloo, because he had also felt that his own performance was definitely subpar. And you would believe him on that front given how Lando had him on his ass the entire weekend. And having doubt cross your mind regarding your own abilities is the last thing that you need when you're heading to a track that possesses the characteristics that Baku does. But lest we forget that just the year prior, Baku proved to be a happy hunting ground for him. He had taken his second F1 win here in a well-controlled drive that proved to the world that whenever he locks in, he can deliver. And so far this season, he was locking in a hell of a lot more than he wasn't. Thus, people were expecting quite a lot of him this weekend. How did it pan out? Well, yeah. Right from the get-go, things were tough. There were engine troubles throughout FP1, and in his attempt to make up for lost ground, he began to overdrive the car. He was incurring yellow flag infringements in practice of all things, and then he crashed in Q3 in qualifying, forcing him to start the race from 9th place. The silver lining was that Lando himself didn't fare much better by placing 7th, and that his overall pace wasn't really that bad at all. Though a silver lining means nothing if you start throwing that away too.
Yep.
He started that race from the 5th row, and he was still on it as everyone else went past. Remarkable, really, given he had crept off the mark before the lights went out, and thus was destined for an automatic slam dunk penalty for a false start. Though he would never serve it after he had this clumsy off at turn 5, drop kicking him out of the race and forcing him to walk back to the pit lane, an activity that yields no points. As he meandered into the media pen, he came out with his hands up, admitting that he goofed up badly, acknowledging that he should have known better about the track conditions, the dirty air, anticipation of the lights, God's essence, everything. He described it as his worst weekend in racing, and I won't argue with him on that one. That was rancid by anyone's metrics. But what made this whole thing jarring was that on the lead up to this race, Oscar had been the most solid, consistent driver on the entire grid who nary put a foot wrong and who seldom finished outside the podium. Everyone largely expected this to just be a one-off, a bump in the road, a mild inconvenience, a minor spot of turbulence, and he thought so too. Yeah.
Actually, it was just one of the...
When it comes to anomalies, Singapore was a big one. For whatever reason, the Mercedes of Jorge Ben Russell went noisily faster than everybody en route to a dominant victory, while McLaren couldn't really hold an answer to him. Max Verstappen too was holding both of them to the fire as he performed his latest magic trick of turning a 2-horse title race into a 3-horse one. The McLaren pair were meddling in behind, fighting over each other for the podium. Oscar was faster in qualifying despite trailing in practice, though the turning point of that weekend would come only 3 corners into the race when Lando cannoned into the rear of Max's car and then into the side of Oscar's one to perform the racing equivalent of a marginal sliding tackle under the guise of a ref who's in deep with some loan sharks. Oscar was quick on the horn to bitch and moan to the McLaren hierarchy about Lando's over-exuberance, but they declined to perform the by now standard switcheroo. The lesson that Oscar had to take out of this is that in an inter-team title fight, good luck playing nice, even if McLaren would later state that there would be repercussions for Lando out of this. But if he thought this was bad, well, the next round would be worse. And this time, the blame game would do a complete 180. Being 3/10 off in sprint qualifying is pretty grim, but attempting a switchback in a space about 1 car with too small for an F1 car led to a calamitous orgasm of carbon fiber that threw them both out of the points. And so now that those repercussions I just
This
mentioned,
was bad.
yeah, they were gone now. Everything was now even Stevens. sort of. The main race wasn't a hell of a lot better, with Lando once again eating into the points deficit, while Oscar struggled to find any real pace. And it wouldn't get any better in Mexico, as he found himself further away from Lando in qualifying. And while he did finish that race in 5th, he was 42 seconds down the road from Lando, who not only took the race win, but had also usurped Oscar in the driver's standings too. After having a perceived unassailable lead in the driver's standings, Oscar was now on the back foot. Okay, so at this point, it was pretty clear that this wasn't just some one-off thing going on here. It had been multiple races in a row now where Oscar's pace had taken a complete nosedive, and now there were a whole bunch of theories running around as to what could have served as the catalyst for this. The answer a lot of people ran to was, well, that this was some kind of internal conspiracy against Oscar, that the recent upgrades favored the other side of the garage, that the upper...
All the time I'm feeling that, like, Lando is their favorite. Like, I have heard that a bunch of times too, but they're like,
management had a different set of rules for both drivers, that they wouldn't fight for him if he was summoned to the steward.
Our British bias, you know.
Oscar was being railroaded in lieu of their golden child, for he was their driver, and Oscar wasn't. Very nice. Very cute. All very enticing. But surely there's a logical explanation for everything going on here.
Really?
Right? Well,
Really?
analyzing their Q3 runs through telemetry and, you know, our eyes, Lando was a lot more committed under brakes and utilized more of the track than what Piastri did on his lap. In the first 3 corners alone, he had gained 3/10 over Oscar. If you want more in-depth analysis on this, check out this video by former F2 driver Callum Williams, because he knows what he's talking about.
And I don't understand anything of this. Zigzags.
I'm just an online clown with cave paintings. Now, Oscar was running a lower downforce setting that weekend, and the car didn't really appear to rotate quite as well as Lando's did. But the aim of the grip speed trade-off didn't even work in his favor, and part of the reason why Lando's car turned like it did was due to his late braking, which pitched the weight over the front axle and increased rotation. This of course affects his line through the next 2 corners, so it all adds up. This isn't witchcraft, nor bias, nor delusion, or anything else. It's real. It's data. It's fact.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal.
Oscar.
But like, your driving style doesn't change like in one day. If he did win and before and now he is braking later, of course, if he did that before, then this shouldn't happen.
He did mention after the race that for the last couple of events, he had to drive the car very differently. And that can happen even after just the smallest of upgrades. But even if there was this grand scheme internally with McLaren to be the Tonya Harding to Oscar's Nancy Kerrigan, if you want to fight for championships, you have got to adapt to the changing characteristics in the car's behavior. And Oscar is smart enough to know this himself. And in the next round at Interlagos, while Lando did have the edge in pace, the deficit wasn't quite as large as what it was in Mexico. It was still 3/10, but it was damage limitation at least. However, retiring in the sprint over a squabble with the laws of physics was of serious hindrance. Going after the water is fine, but save it for after dark. And then he incurred a 10-second penalty in the main race over this wreck between he and Kimi Antonelli that dropkicked Charles Leclerc out of the race, taking away Ferrari's chance to ruin it anyway later on. Thanks to that 10-second penalty, it effectively cost him a shot at getting onto the podium, though debate raged over this penalty because, in the steward's view, Oscar was not in control of his car and was not alongside the front mirror heading into the apex.
This one I didn't understand too. I thought Oscar didn't need to get the penalty, but okay.
Thereby breaching the driving standards guidelines. Okay, fair enough. That much has been explained. So, why the hell then, in the very next round in Las Vegas, when he got absolutely yeeted by Liam Lawson, in a far more egregious act, was there no penalty given out then? I know the FIA is inept and is being led by the corrupt inventor of the micropenis, but can we at least have some consistent...
What did you say? Can you say that? Like, loud?
See in the house? Could you at least afford us that? And I'll echo that sentiment as well, for McLaren. All they had to do was manage the situation for the remainder of the year. There was no need to test the limits, no need to push their luck. And yet, as we all know by now, both Lando and Oscar were disqualified at the end of the Las Vegas Grand Prix due to excessive plank wear on their cars, thus dragging Max Verstappen well and truly back into the title picture. And ironically, bringing...
That was show.
Oscar closer to Lando in the point standings. Though reflecting on the respective pace that weekend, Oscar was nowhere near Lando. In fact, in Q3, Lando was a full second ahead of Oscar, and it might have been even more had he not been caught out in the final sector and completed what would have been a lap of the gods. Some may call that a bottle, but the conditions that evening were torrid. Everyone that night was driving with the grace of a drunk on a slip and slide, and in the end, it wasn't Lando who wound up a second behind his teammate. Now look, I get it. May seem premature to already write off his title chances. Plenty of stuff can happen in those final 2 rounds of the 2025 season, and
Now it's just one. Now when I'm writing this, it's 3rd of December. So last one, if I'm remembering it right, it's this weekend at 7th. So just one. But yeah.
I'm guessing that soon after this video releases, he would have found his mojo by then, because that's just how my videos age. But while we look through his performances, dissect his lap times, and the increasing rate of driving mistakes, the overwhelming factor behind his recent downfall hasn't actually really got that much to do with himself. Instead, it's what's happening on the other side of that garage. So much was made of Lando Norris's mass transit of bottles in the first half of the season, and I covered this earlier this year where I proclaimed that he was throwing away the championship again. But somewhere along the line this season, he changed. He seemed to be reining in his errors. His general performances picked up, his psyche was so much better, and had not for that engine failure at Zandvoort, this season would have been over long ago. And yes, the noise for this uptick in form has been nowhere near as loud as it was for his dark times, and especially not as compared to Piastri. This community loves to disparage, bully, and belittle whenever the slightest mistake is made. I know, popcorn the kettle black on that one. The wider community doesn't like to give Lando his props, and to be fair, he does have a propensity to trot on his own dick every now and again. I've given him enough shit this season to clog a compost silo, but in the same way that Oscar Piastri worked on himself on the lead up to the start of the season, Lando has cured a lot of his ailments in the second half of the season. Yes, there are those favoritism accusations, but look, if Australia's Uncle Chungus is rubbishing those claims, we're just digging ourselves an endless hole here. Or maybe it's sour grapes on his part. Maybe he still wants to be known as the last Australian Formula 1 world champion. Well, whatever the case, as much as it hurts, we gotta give credit where credit is due here, for this has been a career-defining state of driving from the man from Bristol, and has evidently set him on a course to become the newest Formula 1 world champion of the world. I've just jinxed him now, haven't I?
Sadly, I didn't feel that he answered our question. But like, yeah, still I had a feeling that something is wrong with his car. And some parts it totally looked like a favoritism about a few times. But yeah, like for now Piastri is the 3rd. There is still a chance, but it's very, very tiny, and yeah, I sadly think that he will not get it. I kind of wanted to, but oh well. Hopefully maybe next year, who knows. But yeah, thank you for watching this video with me, and hopefully you did enjoy. And if you did, please consider to leave a like and subscribe, and hopefully I'm going to see you next time. Bye!